What's up guys, RGT85 here, and today on the channel we sort of have a 2-for-1 video. I'm not sure if I've ever done something like this before. Both a news story that I want to talk about and a trip down memory lane because one of my favorite games of all time just had a birthday. So I kind of wanted to share my experiences with the game, sort of talk about the history of the game and why this game was so big and impactful. But first we have to talk about this news story because it's very exciting to me. It involves a game that I think would be tailor-fitted for the Nintendo Switch, and it could be potentially coming to the Nintendo Switch. And then we will talk about a game that just had a birthday, a fantastic game, a game that is in my top 10 games of all time, and is a game that I really love and want to talk about. So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's get into this.
Hey, RGT85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my god, it's Stevie Richards! So when it comes to the Nintendo Switch, we have seen some late ports from companies, and that's for a variety of reasons. Let's face it, after the failures of the Wii U, a lot of companies were probably very skeptical about the Nintendo Switch, and they had a right to be so. This Wii U sold absolutely horrible, only like 13 million units sold worldwide, so third-party companies were very skeptical of putting their games on the system. We've seen things like the Mega Man Legacy Collection that would have been a perfect fit for the Nintendo Switch from Capcom come to the Nintendo Switch, but much later. And you've even seen it with Sega. Sega recently released the Sega Genesis Collection on the PS4 and the Xbox One. A great collection of Sega Genesis game with some modern touches into it as well. Things like online play and some really cool filters that you can do. But then it was not announced for the Nintendo Switch, and a lot of people were like, well, what the hell is this? This would be perfect on the Switch playing these Sega Genesis games on the go. Well, of course, recently Sega announced that the Sega Genesis Collection would be coming to the Nintendo Switch, much to the delight of a lot of people, myself included, because I was a Sega Genesis kid and I absolutely loved the Sega Genesis. So I have that on the Xbox One. I will be getting it again on the Nintendo Switch because the Switch is portable and portable games are pretty cool. And a recent collection of games was released by Sega for the PS4, the Xbox One, and Steam, and it pretty much got the same treatment that this other game, the Sega Genesis Collection, got. Where is the Nintendo Switch version? And that is, of course, the Shenmue HD Collection. Now, the Shenmue HD Collection is something that we reviewed for the Xbox One, and I absolutely loved it. Kind of weird how glitchy it was for some people, but for other people it wasn't. Like, I didn't have really any major glitches while playing the games, but a lot of people had tons of major glitches playing the game. So, I don't know, it's kind of weird how that ended up being. But of course, the Shenmue 1 and 2 HD Collection features Shenmue 1 and 2, two awesome games, really groundbreaking games at the time. Maybe they haven't really, kept up all that well in terms of how they fare with modern games, but if you were around for Shenmue, or if you've never experienced Shenmue, you could definitely see how this laid the groundwork for open world games in general, because there was absolutely nothing like it at the time, and it was an absolutely fantastic experience. So I loved playing it on the Xbox One, but I know in the back of a lot of people's minds they were like, why is this not on the Nintendo Switch? Shenmue has never been a portable game before, and this would be a perfect opportunity for it. Well, in a recent interview that was done at Tokyo Game Show by a website called 4Gamer, they actually spoke with the localization director and the localization producer for Shenmue HD Collection and asked about a Nintendo Switch version of the game, and this is the response that they got. So 4Gamer says, speaking of retro, at the Sega Ages event a few days ago, there were a lot of people saying that they wanted Shenmue 1 and 2 to come to Switch, to which the localization director said, the fans have really shown their love for Shenmue, and for that I really am grateful. Personally, I think it'd be great if you could play Shenmue on the Switch anywhere. And then the localization producer said, whether or not we can do something like that in reality, we're taking the fans' opinions into consideration. Following up on that might take some time, but it's definitely something I want to consider. So basically what this means to me is they will probably bring this to the Nintendo Switch. I've heard rumors about this collection coming to the Nintendo Switch when it was announced for the PS4 and the Xbox One, much like I heard that the Sega Genesis Collection would be coming to the Nintendo Switch eventually. So things like this honestly just take time. You have to imagine that when they decided to do a Shenmue HD Collection, the Nintendo Switch was probably pretty fresh fresh and it was pretty new, so they wanted to sort of gauge the market on that. And that's why a lot of ports end up coming later to the Nintendo Switch. Games like Dragon Ball FighterZ and things like that, you know, games that have recently released, it's because they didn't know how the market would be receptive to the Nintendo Switch. So now a lot of companies are sort of scrambling for it. But I definitely think the Shenmue 1 and 2 HD Collection will come to the Nintendo Switch. This is a collection that would be fantastic on the system. I've heard that it hasn't sold all that great on the PS4 and the Xbox One, so they'll probably want to expand it to as many different platforms as they can, because honestly, things like that make sense from a business perspective. And of course, these are just Dreamcast games. It wouldn't be super hard for the Nintendo Switch to run them, and it would be the first time that these games are available portably, so that would be super cool in my opinion. So is Shenmue 1 and 2 HD Collection coming to the Nintendo Switch? I'm gonna go ahead and say more than likely. Things like this sort of leave the door open for the Nintendo Switch to get this collection of games, and I think it would be a fantastic addition to the library. Definitely a double dip for me, because I would love to have these games portably. So let me know in the comments section down below if you would like to see the Shenmue HD Collection come to the Nintendo Switch, and if you say no, then I don't know if we could be friends anymore. So if you were a kid in the 90s playing video games, you probably remember the Great Video Game Battle. There were two systems and two mascots that really went to battle and things, and it was pretty much like, you know, you either loved one or you loved the other. You didn't really love both of them. And that, of course, was Nintendo versus Sega. Now, coming off of the NES, I was surprisingly a Sega Genesis kid. And of course, the two mascots that were really at the forefront of this, the generals, the commanders of their armies, were, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario. Now, Mario had the advantage of being around for much longer. Of course, Super Mario Bros. Released in 1985 on the NES, so everyone knew Mario and everyone knew what Mario was about. But during that time frame, Nintendo just sort of had this kiddie image that a lot of people were associating with it, whereas Sega was much more aggressive in things like marketing and their character development, and even in Sonic the Hedgehog themselves. And it really became this thing where it was like Sonic games versus Mario games, and really a lot of people liked the Sonic games at the time because of it was something different. It was something fresh. Sonic wasn't, you know, this babyface character. He had a bit of an attitude and things like that. Looking back though, you have to sort of think that Super Mario World was probably the better game versus the Sonic the Hedgehog games. There was more to do, there was a longer experience, there was better platforming, whereas the Sonic the Hedgehog games sort of just, you know, faded into obscurity a bit when it comes to things like that. They never really were able to continue the pedigree of those original games and really advance upon it. And that's sort of what brings me to this point, is that Sonic was arguably bigger than Mario at one point in time, but there was a big change of tide in the war that happened on September 29th, 1996 in North America, and that was the release of Super Mario Bros. 64. Now, of course, everyone was excited about the Nintendo 64 because it was this powerful system from Nintendo, 64 bits versus the 32-bit systems that were out on the market. You had the PlayStation, you had the Sega Saturn that were available on the market. The Sega Saturn didn't have a Sonic the Hedgehog game, so Nintendo kind of swooped in with the Nintendo 64 and really tried to do something different. And we of course got Super Mario 64, which in my opinion is one of the greatest games of all time. It's absolutely legendary, iconic, and still to this day is a great game to play because they really advanced the series, because Mario had always been these 2D platformer games, much like Sonic the Hedgehog had been, and they really took Mario and put him into a whole new world, a whole new aesthetic. I remember the first time I played Super Mario 64 was over at my uncle's house. He actually got an N64 and Super Mario 64 on launch, and I was just absolutely amazed at this game. It was this big 3D castle, and you could just go anywhere and do anything pending you had enough stars to get to the next area. But it was unlike anything that we had ever seen before. There had been some 3D platformers here and there that had released on the PS3 or the PS1 and of course the Sega Saturn, but nothing the size and magnitude of what Super Mario 64 was. And I remember sitting there playing this game and I was like, oh my god, this is absolutely amazing. When I ended up renting an N64 and Super Mario 64 for like 3 days from a local video game store, and I remember just sitting there playing it. I don't even think I slept. Like, Super Mario 64 was just so different. You of course had to save Princess Peach from Bowser, much like in every Mario game, but just the level design was so creative, and these huge 3D open environments that you could explore with multiple tasks to do. It was a huge jump in what we had seen in Mario, and probably one of the biggest jumps in gaming ever. You know, to take a 2D platformer and make it a 3D platformer, to take it from a linear experience to an open world experience where you have this massive castle, you have all these secrets within the castle, you have all these stars to collect, and all these things like that. It was just such an amazing experience, and something that, you know, I think a lot of people, they may never experience a feeling like that, because with generational gaps nowadays, you know, it's incremental. It's not nearly as big as it used to be. Jumping from a 2D platformer through a 3D open world was just absolutely amazing. And Super Mario 64 is now 22 years old, which is absolutely crazy to think about, but it's still a game that is just absolutely amazing. You can play it on the 3DS via the DS version of the game, Super Mario 64 DS. You can of course play it on your N64, you can play it on your Wii U, and it's a game that you really need to experience if you never have experienced it before, because it was just absolutely awesome. And I can't believe it's 22 years old. It still feels great today. It still plays great. It still sounds great. And I just wanted to take this trip down memory lane because I absolutely love Super Mario 64. Alright, and that is going to do it for the video today. Let me know in the comments section down below what you think of Shenmue potentially coming to the Nintendo Switch, and of course your thoughts on Super Mario 64. Which side of the fence were you on? Were you on the Sega army side, or were you on the Nintendo army side? Did you like Sonic? Did you like Mario? And how impactful was Super Mario 64 to you? Did you experience it when it first came out, or did you experience the game much later? And as always, thank you for watching this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Make sure you guys check out the pinned comment in the comment section down below. I'm doing a big giveaway right now that I want all of you guys to enter, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.